Well, Philippe, I'm a little jealous, really. I've been sucking up to you for a few years and I didn't get a medal. You just met him, for God's sake. I mean, really. Let me begin with saying to you, Forrest, thank you very much. I get the hint, larger than life. I know I've stacked it on this year, so I'll go home and sort it out. Well, happy Australia Day, because today is in Australia our national day. And of course, we think of Australia as the lucky country. It is a lucky country, and or not so lucky, depending on how much steel China buy from us. So, Mr. Shen and your people, I certainly hope to keep buying our iron ore, because you are the absolute rock of our economy. Let me tell you a little bit about Australia to begin with. We have a population of about 23.5 million people, with about 18.5 million people at driving age. In the main, you need to be 18 years of age in Australia to drive a car. We sell about 1.15 million cars a year, and we have an enormous 67 brands of cars for sale every day in Australia. I think in America it's 39. So 67 choices our consumers get to make, and we have an enormous car park of 17.3 million cars on the road. We have 7.7 million households. There are 756 cars per 1,000 households. It's an enormous number. And this should tell everybody, I think it's 2.3 cars per every household, and that should tell everybody that we are a very hungry nation when it comes to cars, and it should tell the OEMs really when they give us these enormous targets. I think we did a study late last year. We worked out that if our volume is 1.1 million, the factory targets that we're given represent about 1.8 million. So I don't understand how we're supposed to achieve those numbers. So the only way an OEM in Australia can get growth is by conquest. So there was always from our years big winners and big losers. The average weekly earnings in Australia are about, and I'm talking US dollars to make it easy for everybody, is about 1,330 US dollars per week, about 70,000 US dollars a year. The mining sector is the highest industry in terms of income. The average wage in the mining sector is 2,300 US dollars a week. And of course in the retail sector, which is our sector, the lowest sector, the average wage is about $950. So there's a quantum change from the top end to the bottom end. And in our industry, of course, a general manager will earn roughly around 70,000 US dollars, a service manager about the same, an F&I manager does remarkably better, somewhere in the order of about $110,000, a sales manager about $110,000, a service advisor about $1,200 a week, and a salesperson around $67,000 a year, depending if you're an average, and you can be as high as about $130,000, if you're a good salesman. The industry itself, of course, has a revenue of about $74 billion. The annual growth forecast for the 9 to 14 5-year period was 4.3%, but our growth forecast for the 14 to 19 period is only 0.1%. So we're recognising we're going to go into a very tough time. Dealers average collectively about 1.7 billion in profit. There are 4,800. They pay 3.9 billion in wages. There's about 4,800 franchises in Australia. There are 2,300 rooftops, and there's about 1,600 owners. In 2014, our volume dropped a little bit. At the end of the year, we're about 1,070,000 cars sold. But there's a question which is a great challenge, I think, for us, and I'm sure it's for many of the jurisdictions in the world. How many of those cars are actually sold? Because we have enormous pressure on us from the OEMs to report cars sold that actually aren't sold, and we would estimate, we call them cyber cars, find 10 or 20 extra cars in the dealership to report them sold. Of course, they're not sold. The warranty clock starts ticking, and they become a very big issue as time goes by. We estimate that that to be around 10 to 12% of the actual cars reported sold aren't really sold. You know, they become new used cars sitting in the back of the inventory there, deteriorating in their value as the warranty clock ticks, and of course the dealer has no opportunity at all to gross out of those cars, because when a consumer comes to buy them, you know, the warranty clock in some cases may be 6 months into the warranty period and it hasn't travelled out of the storage facility. So of course, in terms of market share, a very interesting statistic in Australia is out of our 1,070,000, which is down 5% from the year before for some brands, down 2% overall in the market. But Toyota continues to be our market leader with a market share of 20% in our market, so they are certainly well dominant. And of course GM is the next one down the scale with just under 10%, Mazda being 9%, Hyundai being 8.5%, Ford being 7.7%, Nissan being 6.8%. So the interesting statistic about that is the top 6 selling brands out of the 67 brands in the country sell 61% of the volume. So therefore we have the rest, 61 brands, fighting for the rest of the 39% that is left. We keep letting brands in, we keep letting them in, and we wonder, you know, why that we have to make these enormous investments in image programs for brands that have got a market share that's a poof of nothing really. So, you know, there are serious issues for us in terms of the image programs, but there's certainly serious issues in terms of that market share relevance. You know, we are a strong multi-franchise country, though those top 6 brands expect us to have independent standalone stores where they expect us to invest many millions of dollars. Our risk, of course, is the dealers in Australia have $17 billion worth of real estate. And the risk going forward is, and we say that in this market, and I'm sure it's the same in every country, there are now 2 front doors. There's the front door on the street, which the OEM is very happy for you to have. It forms the basis of your franchise agreement. But the other front door is the internet. And they're not very keen about you having a big say what happens in that. So our concern, of course, there is that we may end up being a great $17 billion billboard program for the OEMs for these great Taj Mahals that they expect us to continue building. We've had some serious challenges over the last couple of years, and one of them was that our manufacturing base is leaving. So we've had over the last few years 4 manufacturers. Mitsubishi left the country 3 years ago, and last December, of course, the 3 remaining manufacturers, Holden, which is GM, Ford and Toyota, all decided that it's no longer viable for them to manufacture cars in Australia. So we are going to become a nation of importers, which we, of course, as an industry, understand that, you know, that an OEM has got to be able to affordably make cars. And the government, in its wisdom, decided that we might open our doors to used cars being imported from other jurisdictions, like Japan, where they are deemed to become at the end of their life. I don't know how we're going to rebirth them and give them a whole new life in Australia. I think when you're over, you're over. But we have won that battle. We fought very hard, and we can tell you now that we will not have imported used cars in Australia. But having said that, there is a high likelihood that we'll have what's called parallel imports. So an individual, Patrick, can go to the UK and buy a Jaguar and bring it to Australia if he wants to. Of course, there's a GST which needs to be paid and those things. Why would a consumer do that? Well, they'll do it because in the main, we have an impost at that higher level. We have what's called in Australia a luxury car tax. It's an extraordinary tax in a way. A vehicle over $60,000 attracts a 30% tax over that price. So it adds an 8 to 12, and sometimes in real prestige brands, a very significant sum to the price. It's an absurd tax. Even the head of the Treasury said that in 2012, that it's an absurd tax and it should be abolished. And that, of course, is our next battle. And our argument, of course, is why do we tax a car? You know, we don't tax a Rolex, we don't tax a luxury yacht, we don't tax a painting, but we certainly tax a Hilux. But I don't understand why somebody who's buying a Hilux for work and happens to spec it up over the $60,000 threshold needs to pay an additional tax. So we think that is a very significant problem for us, and we are advocating to the government that they should replace that tax with a general luxury tax. The issue, of course, for the government is it has to replace $500 million that they're collecting through us. And we, of course, at car dealers, we're great tax collectors because we have all the mechanisms in place to collect what we need to collect. The other debate we've had this year is that what the other associations representing independent repairers, parts manufacturers and like, they took us to task on an issue about the right to repair debate. What they say is the consumer should have the choice to choose where they get their new vehicle serviced, and we don't disagree with that. But what we do disagree with is a consumer going to an independent repairer, having their car serviced and having non-genuine parts fitted to those cars during the warranty period. And of course, when something doesn't quite work out, whose fault is it? It's always the car dealer's fault. So our issue has always been, that our argument has been, and we put this to government, that we believe the consumer should have the right to choose without question. But we also believe the consumer should be told when they're having a non-genuine part fitted to their car, and the Minister agreed. And now, as of about 3 weeks ago, an independent repairer, a panel beater, anyone who is servicing a car must tell a consumer when they're fitting a non-genuine part. They're not very happy about that. Of course, our other issue, of course, is training. You know, I think in an industry it's the same, I'm sure, in every jurisdiction, is that you are as good as the people that you employ. And we're trying to break this cycle of recycling people through, you know, dealerships, and one moves from the other. We want to grow great young people. You know, the millennial people are very different to us with no hair. You know, we read newspapers, they don't know what they are. So there is a big change. And in Australia, we think that training is printing a business card. Once we print their business card, they're done. No problem. And then we sack them in 6 months' time because they're no good. But we didn't do anything to help them. We didn't do anything to get them advanced and to educate them. And we are certainly, with help NADA, we are making an enormous change in that area. It's a very brief overview of our country, and I'll be certainly happy to have you all down there. It's a great country. We have no pollution. We have blue skies every single day. Of course, where I come from in Melbourne, we can have it all in one day. We can have summer, winter, spring and autumn. It'll be 44 degrees, that's Celsius by the way, so 110 in the morning at 11 o'clock and 13 about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll have a hailstorm in the middle. It's one of the great things about where I live. The AADA National Dealer Convention will be held in Melbourne, August 11th and 12th, and I invite you all to come along, and of course, you certainly won't regret it. We'll make you very welcome. So my closing remark is be there or be square. Thank you very much for having me.